All right. Welcome to the Unfazed, Unedited podcast, where we provide commentary on complicated topics in an uncomplicated format. I'm Dr. Shauna Payne Gold, and I go by she, her, hers pronouns. And Dr. Lisa, how goes it before we get into the thick of things here?
Yeah, it's going well. I mean, we're in December now, so that's devastating. I mean, December is birthday month, and there's like lots of like twinkly lights and warm sweater days and stuff like that I like, but generally still in an existential crisis over the fact that we're about to round out the year of 2025.
I just want light back. I'm so sick of darkness like at 4:30. That's my thing. Like everything else is okay, but I feel like a vampire that's up before daylight, but then
hmm
still have a long night. I'll sit down and have dinner and it is relatively early, but if I look outside, it looks like midnight. So anyway,
Yeah, yeah, like I'll do that too. I'll sit down and I'll be like, "Oh, it's the end of the day. It must be nearly bedtime." And I look at my watch and it's like 5:30.
that or our bodies are just telling us we're tired. How about
Yeah,
that?
yeah, it could be that too. Yeah.
We need to just shut it down. So anyway, all right, Lisa, let me get us into the word of the week. So, Lisa, I was trying to look for a word of the week because it usually comes up very naturally in just my day-to-day work and running across something and so forth. And for my fellowship that I'm a part of, they gifted us a Harvard Business Review subscription, online subscription, which is really nice because obviously we get to read all those really great articles, but sometimes those articles riff off of forthcoming books from the HBR press. And so that's how I discovered this particular word, which is the Octopus Organization. Octopus Organization. And I liked it because it kind of flirts with my business brain, but at the same time, systems thinking that we talk about all the time on this podcast. Octopus organization is a way to describe an organization that's designed for or an environment where success comes not from the rigid control, but this distributed intelligence, continuous learning, and adaptation. And so it's literally named after what they deem as one of the most intelligent animals on the planet. And so now we need to juxtapose that to what they call the Tin Man organization, which there's a structure, it's very rigid. Yes, it can pivot a bit, but it is not as flowing and organic as obviously the body of an octopus. And so, with that, Jana Warner and Phil LeBrun are the uh, co authors of the forthcoming book, The Octopus Organization, which I cannot wait to get my hands on. They are two Amazon Web Services enterprise strategists, which kind of made me laugh because AWS like famously went out about a month ago and got
Right,
restored.
right. Yep,
That was really funny to
yep.
me. But the book sounds amazing because Lisa, what I think is really fascinating is, in my humble opinion, based on my years of experience with equity and inclusion work, frankly, the Octopus organization sounds like what we've been practically begging organizations to do anyway. And now it has a name for it and a description for it because we have often said that organizations are sometimes rigid in the worst ways, where, rules are only applied to certain people and not to others, or
Yeah.
change course seems to be so difficult, or what did we talk about in the one of our previous episodes when we talked about that? Look, there's way too much sludge that,
hmm
unfortunately, which makes complete sense when you're talking about a tin man, sludge that prevents you from moving in certain directions rather than others. And so it just really makes it hard to either be in that tin man organization or to respond when you need nimble moments. And so, with that, oftentimes we have lots of diverse people, diverse experiences, diverse contexts, especially now when things are so volatile, that change management has almost seemed like a constant for us, at least, since the last, what, 5 or 6 years now, but I think forever. And so now I think. ironically, here we go, Lisa. This to me is a word, phrase, and book that finally names what a lot of people have been asking for all along and just made it kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
with that, I can see the becoming an octopus organization being something that, let's just stop working against ourselves and embrace it. Like, let's just embrace it finally. Give it a name, embrace it, and let it work in ways that allow people to feel safer at work, allow people to do better work, and allows the work to be more responsive to everybody involved. But thought it was a pretty cool
Mm-hmm.
name and wondering how that lands on you as well.
Yeah, when I first saw it without reading your description, I thought it was like a term for a disorganized, messy, kind of blob of an organization. I do know that octopi, what's the plural of octopus?
Yeah,
Um,
octopi. Yep, yep.
is are very intelligent, but it just made me think, like got the 8 legs or whatever, right? That just like it's all over the place. But it does make sense as you explain it. And I think for me, when I tie it in or think about DEI in organizations or, just being more effective, they're the kind of principle of there's only one way to do things. This is the way to do it. Structured, rigid, inflexible, the Tin Man piece of this just is also really aligned with white male leadership, right? Like that's not true of all white male leaders, but generally speaking. And then when that kind of
Yeah.
is challenged, well, maybe we could do it this way, or here's a new way to think about it, or perhaps we should be more flexible or more fluid, or change this rule and do that. Like, kind of when we're starting to think about equity in an organization or inclusivity, then there's a lot of resistance.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, so I don't think conceptually this octopus organization is new. I'm going to be curious to hear your thoughts once you've read the book or gone into more detail about if if you feel like it is just rehashing kind of an old concept with a new name intentionally, strategically to make it more palatable.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the book too. It is, I believe, in pre-sale right now when I went to look at it. But yeah, I think it's a great metaphor to think about, but I want to see how, you know me, Lisa, it's okay, how do we actualize this? This is a great concept, but how do we actualize it? I've read enough business books to
Yeah,
know
yeah.
there's lots of great concepts as far as visuals and so forth. I mean, blue ocean, red ocean, all these different things that businesses and organizations use. How do you actualize it? How do you suggest organizations actualize it, especially when they are very rigid and they're needing to adopt a new strategy? And some examples of
Yeah.
how it's worked.
Yeah, I
People
think
will
the
need to be
examples,
convinced.
yeah, that will be really important because one of, human nature, we're seeing this, in live action here in the United States right now, but human
Hmm.
nature is when things are changing, as you know from your change management training, and things are fluid and moving at a pace that feels too fast, people retreat back to what they know or understand to be stable frameworks, which is why our
Uh-huh.
political system has lurched to the right because orienting towards authoritarianism and or autocrat where things are set in
Mhm.
stone and you're told what to do and you just do it, right? That feels much more comforting than kind of mess. Um,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I'll be curious because how does that look on an organizational versus a cultural or social level, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Hmm.
Trying to apply this to a whole country would be interesting, right?
Yeah, do it, do it.
Ah.
How about your next book, Shauna?
Oh my gosh. No, my book would be, let me tell you all the ways that don't work. How about that? Process of elimination. That's going to be the name of my book. Process of
Okay.
elimination. Shit that doesn't work. Here we go.
I
And this
love it.
boom,
I
boom,
love
boom.
it.
Tons of examples. So anyway. All right. Kind of into phase one.
Okay. So a few weeks ago, some more delightful guidance was issued from the current federal administration. It was a cable that was issued to the State Department. And it was sent to all embassy and consular officials around the world. And it basically said that anyone that is applying for a visa to come stay in the United States, so we're not talking about like, I'm coming for a 2 week vacation to Disney World. We're talking about people who are looking for visas to live in the United States, so work visas, that sort of thing. That now they should be visa or consular officers should be centering the person's age or their likelihood that they might rely on public benefits and become a public charge or a drain on US resources. So it went on to say certain medical conditions, including but not limited to cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, cancers, diabetes, metabolic diseases, neurological diseases, and mental health conditions can require hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of care. And so they are giving visa officers more power to make those decisions about whether or not to grant a visa based on a person's health status. So it's not that health hasn't been part of a visa application. Like I had to go and have a physical when I had applied for my green card. I had to do that, and that there were like specialized doctors that had to do that. So it's like it's always kind of been there, but this is just making it more central and it's expanding the number of health conditions. And so diabetes and even obesity will be included in this. So theoretically, Shauna, a visa officer at an embassy at some point, some part of the world could look at a person who is heavier and say, nope, because I perceive you to be overweight, I perceive you to be obese. I therefore am making the conclusion that you are going to be a drain on US resources. You're going to cost us too much money. And so I'm not going to grant you a visa to come to do this job that you've been offered, right? And are being sponsored to do. I feel like this is add it to the list of ghastly, ghoulish, cruel rules and regulations that have been rolled out from this administration. And I guess time will tell to see how this changes things. But when you think about that long list that I read to you and mental health conditions, we could be talking depression, anxiety, right? I
Mhm.
mean, that's basically the bucket, right? Like that's like most of the medical conditions. Um, what about people who use wheelchairs? What about
Mhm.
people who are physically, their mobility is impacted, not through a wheelchair, but some other something, right?
Mhm.
Is that going to be cause for visa denial? I mean, I just feel like discrimination is written all over this, left, right, and
Mhm.
center. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are.
Mhm. Well, and here's the thing, looking at the numbers on that. I mean, think about World Health Organization numbers, right? So what they're saying is at least as of 2022, 16% of adults worldwide were considered as obese. Put a pin in obese. I'll circle back to that in a minute. But considered obese, 2022, about 16%. And then 14% in that same year had diabetes, right? And then
Okay.
when we add on top of that, not only are we thinking about these officers that are supposed to keep track of the health conditions and so forth, this also connects to the applicant's dependents as well. So visa officers have been asked to take a look at all these other details. So the age, the how many dependents they have, whether these dependents have disabilities, special needs, so forth. So if I were trying to come into the United States, I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't be able to get in. Would not be able to get in based on a litany of things, almost everything
Okay.
listed. So, and with that, what I think is really fascinating is, again, we know this is not, I don't care for this, but let's say we went with this. We know it's not going to be equitably applied. We
Yeah.
know based
Yeah.
on US quote unquote standards, obesity does not is not cookie cutter based on your background, your experience. I mean, like, how do you even know that someone's obese? I will forever continue to bang the drum of the whole obesity thing because I think I shared with you, Lisa. I did my I think it was my first marathon. I did my first marathon and I was at 172 pounds, but based on the physical that I took the following week after doing the marathon, I was considered morbidly obese, even though
Hmm.
I was in probably the best health of my life. I
Right,
don't know what
right.
chart they're using, but clearly that doesn't apply to most people, especially African Americans, African American women, people that the system was never created to cater to or support. Okay, fine. So that is strange. Then on top of that, how do you know or not know whether there is some type of mental health condition without self-report? Like you can't really measure that. Disability, how do you force someone to report or a special need, especially invisible disabilities or special needs? I just, even if someone were in support of this, I'm still begging the question of how in the world do you think this is going to be equitably applied? I don't see it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so circling back, I agree 100% with what you were saying around we're just making it more and more clear that we don't want anyone else here.
Yeah, I mean, I think likely there are going to be obviously physical people have to do physicals, right? And that report has to be provided as part of your visa application. Um, so I
Mm-hmm.
will be it'll be curious to me whether those physicals become more intrusive. Like mine was just
Mm-hmm.
like it was just like a general kind of health check, right? But like will they
Mm-hmm.
actually require more tests or more
Right.
um, opinions, medical opinions from doctors, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
presumably that report will then be more given more weight in the application process. So if I'm handing over a if I am handing over a medical report that says I
Mm-hmm.
have a respiratory condition but I'm white and I look lean, right? Like I have a
Mm-hmm.
thinner build. And then the same person, no, sorry, not the same person, a different person who is not white, who looks
Mm-hmm.
heavier than me, but has the same kind of medical report, respiratory condition, right? Like without our physical presence, the reports look the same.
Right, 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 right.
I'm willing to bet money that I might slide through, right? But
Mm-hmm.
the person that isn't white or, is from a disfavored country
Yes,
and
yes, yes, yes.
appears physically heavier, they're yeah, like I just think there's so many ways that this is going to be abused, even if you say, well, it's not the visa officer really, it's the medical provider that's providing the report. And I'm speculating there. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know whether it's going to be a more robust medical exam or whether it's going to be the same kind of
Mm-hmm.
flimsy medical exam. And then these officers are just going to make whatever the hell assumptions they want to make, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
who's gonna say, sure, I have depression, right? Or I have,
Exactly.
this hip issue. Like, no, people are gonna that's gonna lead people to be potentially dishonest in their medical evaluations. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it's ridiculous, right? Because they've already shut down refugee and asylum claims, or rather, they're privileging white South Africans. Um,
Yes,
and
yes,
now
yes.
this is going to make it a lot harder for people from different countries to come over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and I'm thinking too, because, let's think about the original, just to circle back really quickly, the original intentions for a health physical for a visa, right? The original intention around that was to make sure that it wasn't a public health risk or issue, right? So, you know, I have this aggressive form of COVID and then I'm allowed to come to the United States and here you go, you're welcome. Okay, I'm hearing that. And they have a list of things. But the key words that I think were really important in a couple of articles that I looked at were common issues. Like diabetes is common. Mental health is common. Like the things that they're
right,
trying to add
right.
to the list, they're not things where it's like, oh, this rare case of COVID that's coming over and going to take us all
Hmm.
out. No, these are common concerns that folks have. Um, and with that, once you make it more common, you're telling us that not only do you not want certain people here, but you're trying to make this widespread. And so, with that, again, this kind of, how can I say? Look, this man was forever talking about building a wall. This is a wall
Mm,
that is
yeah,
clear to when it comes to I'm building a wall around the United States. Those that are outside of it, I'm going to create a longer and longer and longer list of reasons why you can't
right.
come here. Good luck.
Yeah.
And in fact, there are going to be some people that literally don't, if this actually happens, there are going to be folks that don't even try to apply. And that it's like, that's the warning sign. Like, okay, forget it. My kid is diabetic. I can't come here. My grandfather that I want to bring with me is diabetic. My spouse, my whomever, they're not even going to apply. They may come visit, but they're certainly not going to come to stay or attempt to stay. So, mission accomplished, right?
Yeah, I love that metaphorical wall, right? It isn't a physical wall, but it is basically kind of building up an electric fence, so to speak, that you can't quite see,
Yes.
but is there.
Yes.
And this is not health related, but just a couple of weeks ago, the numbers came out with international student applications or admissions. I forget what it was, but it had dropped 17%.
17, like 1 7 or 7 0?
1.7,
1 7. Okay. Okay. Still
which is
bad to me.
still a
Yeah.
significant drop
Yeah.
when
Yep.
you think
Exactly.
about the income that, well, for
Mhm.
universities, it's about income. I think it's about global education and making sure you're exposed to different people from different countries and different perspectives, right? But I mean, not being naive about the fact that for universities and colleges, this is a massive revenue loss. But
Mhm.
that's just so this is in 11 months. It's had a
Yeah.
17% drop. So that, and that doesn't even include like this health related visa application obstacle course people now have to jump
Yeah.
through, right? Like, so
Yeah.
it is likely going to drop further. I mean, people with disabilities are basically shit out of luck,
Oh,
right?
for sure. Yep.
You
For
know?
sure. Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. Yep.
so
They're making
yeah,
it who they want here and who they don't.
yeah, it's so, it just feels so, I can't even, the like gross doesn't quite do it, right? There's just something
Yeah. Yeah.
icky and nasty and rotten and
Yeah.
about it.
Well, it goes back to it goes back to I think almost every podcast, if we think about it, our two words, Lisa, which we could probably boil down every single episode to some level of exploitation and some
Mm,
level of lack of empathy. There we go.
yeah.
And the reason why I say that is because it's reminded me of a way, way, way back episode of The Golden Girls where Dorothy was taking Sophia to get something medically done. And she was really ticked off with how things were going. And Dorothy said to the doctor, she said, before you all get all of your training, I wish every single doctor could get very, very sick and understand what every single one of their patients
Mm,
go through before they go to medical school, because then they would have more care, more bedside manner. I mean,
right,
it
right.
was such a profound, I know I'm kind of tearing up her quote, but it was such a profound moment for me because she was just begging for empathy
Yeah,
around, yes, I know this is just one of hundreds of cases that you have, but this is my mother, this is my sister, this is my, child, whatever, what have you. And it always, or at least most recently, at least in these last 12 months, it feels like there's either exploitation going on or empathy is so far away from the people that have these ideas. It's just beyond me. Like I said that about the governor of Texas trying to completely ban DEI while he's sitting in a fucking wheelchair.
right.
You can be part of the population and still not have an ounce of empathy at all.
Yeah. I think it's like a lack of empathy doesn't go far enough. I think it flips over into cruelty, right? Like I see cruelty as
Absolutely.
you're actioning affirmatively implementing policies that are cruel and harmful, but are derived from a lack of empathy. Because I could just sit here and just not have empathy, right? But I don't
Right.
then like kind of mold that lack of empathy into a policy or a regulation that then actively harms people. That's where I feel like it crosses into just like cruelty, like
Yeah.
intentionally so, you know?
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
codifying. I know we have to move on, but to me it feels like, especially those of us who do this work for a living and professionally, it feels like the constant codification of what has always been the underlying sentiments. Like we knew you didn't want certain people in the country, but now you're
Yep.
codifying it. You want to make
Yep.
it into law. Let's crystallize it in a way that can actually be applied in real time. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where we become dangerous. It's one thing
Yeah.
to think, Shauna, you cannot come into this country because you are obese, your kids have autism, you have diabetes, and that's not true, but I'm just exaggerating here.
Right.
So
Right.
therefore, as a result of that laundry list of things, you can't come into this country for any reason.
Yeah.
They've codified what they already thought and felt
Yep.
about
Yep. Yep.
outside of the US. They just codified it.
Yeah.
Yes, so it does flip to cruelty. I completely agree. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well,
yep.
I guess watch this space because as this policy gets actually implemented, we will start to likely see the effects of it. And I'm sure places like KFF News and other health related policy and news outlets will be following to track the impact. So maybe we'll circle back to this in 6 months or so and see what that
Yeah.
impact has been. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. All
I
right.
want to see what the World Health Organization comes up with. Usually they put out statements in regards to things like this. So I want to see what they have to say. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go into phase two. All right, Lisa. I always go with the curious stuff. I've had lots of curious stuff that constantly comes across my socials. But I want to shout out Minna Lee Jamison. She came up with a very interesting reel that I thought we should talk about. And it's kind of the juxtaposition of what we were just talking about of,
Okay.
oh, no, we're not inviting people into the country. Well, really what we're largely talking about is community, especially in the United States. What does community look like? What it doesn't look like?
Mm-hmm.
And so Mina did this really exceptional video where she starts out with the hook of the conversation, quote, everyone wants to be in a village. No one wants to be a villager.
Okay.
And that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks because I'm thinking to myself, of course, the United States has been built on individualism. And um, even when we moved from the melting pot to the mixing bowl analogy, and now the salad and all that other stuff, where
Mm-hmm.
it's how do we continue to maintain individualism while being together in one shared place and space. And so, with that, it shows up obviously very uniquely in the United States. And she goes on because she is from a particular Asian culture where the collective is the priority more than the individual, which I thought was fascinating. I certainly experienced that while we were in Japan, that the collective is more important than the individual. And so she goes on to say that as we are hungry for these communities, we don't want to be exemplary villagers that contribute to those communities. So, saying, for example, something's not my problem, but yet when it is your problem, you want the cavalry to come in, right? Or I want this village or community, but I don't want to inconvenience myself to be community to someone else. And so she goes on using some of these examples where one of the most profound ones that she used was, hey, it just seems like, if I call all my girlfriends right now and say, hey, let's everybody get together and go to brunch, everybody would show up. But yet it seems like a bigger ask if I just ask just one person, hey, could you come pick me up from the airport? So what does that mean in regard to us understanding community? And she acknowledged that, there's some things that we all are experiencing regularly. Capitalism is kicking our ass right now. We're working all the time. We're tired. We don't have a lot of free time in general, much less free time to do for others without expecting anything in return. And so she started kind of giving this list of personal challenges that she is going out of her way to do. So some of these things that are just basic decency and kindness that shouldn't be seen as, oh, I'm doing you a favor, but I'm just doing this out of the humanity of seeing you as another human being. And so, Lisa, when I saw this, it reminded me I was at the grocery store last Friday. And here in our county, they're not doing plastic bags anymore, any of that stuff. You have to bring your own bag, recyclable, all that stuff. And so this lady came and she had her hands full of several things. She didn't get a cart, she didn't get a basket. She just had her arms full of things, right? And so she's putting them there so she can self-scan her way out, right? And something fell on the floor. And I had already bagged up myself. I'm literally pushing my cart about to leave and go to my car, so my hands are free. And so, I forget what dropped on the ground. It wasn't money or anything, but something dropped on the ground. And so I just leaned over to pick it up and hand it to her. And she was literally shocked that I would like even reach to pick up something to help her when she's obviously struggling with all this stuff, right? And that to me exemplified that whole Instagram reel is that
Yes.
interesting that it seems, I mean, people are like, oh my God, you're like a
I know.
saint,
Yep.
an angel for picking up something off the ground when I'm like, hello, dumbasses. Her hands are full. Like I could go down the list of things
Hmm.
that just seem like common sense if you're aware and paying attention to other people. Why would you not? But yet every
Hmm.
day I see people who do not. I see people that, obviously there's somebody walking directly behind them and they don't hold the door. Or I remember when I was very pregnant with Trey and Kendrick, and I would get on the metro later, leaving from teaching class, and only one person ever got up out of a seat for me on the metro train while I was very visually pregnant, and that was a older gentleman who was a Vietnam vet with his own cane that I would not let get up out of his seat. I mean, like basic ass shit like that, Lisa, that
Hmm.
seemed to be common sense and humanity, but now it's clearly not part of our awareness because it's just not a village, a community, of any of that. So
Hmm.
anyway, your thoughts around Mina's
Yeah.
real as I describe it to you.
I mean, I think it's spot on. And I was thinking about this after I watched it. Um, I was trying to put myself in the position of someone who is very individualistic, but doesn't see themselves as that, right? So I was trying to think about, we've talked a little bit about Christianity and how there is some hypocrisy with folks who are people of faith, yet quite happily will refuse to help others. And I was thinking about how one might self conceptualize in that instance, right? Like I believe in the Bible, I believe in its messages, so I'm absolutely community oriented. What are you talking about? Right? While at the same time behaving in a way like these kind of bigger macro things, like being against universal healthcare, being against public education, being against, other kind of more communitarian oriented policies. And so I do think there's this disconnect between people don't, who believe that they are a good villager, right? But they're actually not. Like, and I think that because the way I was doing that was like, how would this video land on someone who actually really doesn't want to get a vaccine, right? Because that's an imposition on their rights, which we've talked about in this podcast before. But
Yes, yes,
in the
yes.
same breath sees themselves as an upstanding member of their community, whatever that community is. And I'm not picking on Christianity here specifically. I think that's just a very easy example because
No,
it's kind
pick
of
on it.
a
Go
group
for
of
it.
people.
Go for it.
Um, so, and I was like, I think you're going to get people listening to her going, yeah, 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 totally. 100% what she says, while at the very same time behaving in ways where they're not picking up the can that falls out of someone's cart, or
Right.
they are advocating for a policy that's really restrictive at their local school board or in their community, right? Um, and so there's this interesting disconnect between how America, the United States, was founded, right? Individualism, as you pointed out, one of the key foundational kind of theoretical underpinnings,
Mhm.
and then how people in the United States see themselves. And I always have found that interesting as someone from the United Kingdom, which is also a fairly
Yeah.
individualistic society. But I can't
Mhm.
remember if I said this on a prior episode, Shauna, about Zohran Mamdani and some of the ideas he has for New York City. Um,
Yeah.
I was listening to a British podcast, and they were talking about how for Americans, his ideas feel like super extreme and radical. But for anyone in Western Europe, they're just like, sure, okay, you know. Sorry, dog is barking at a squirrel. Um, and I just thought that sums it up, right? Like you're, hang on.
Uh-oh. Is the dog's still barking at the squirrel?
No, no. Okay, come here.
That's why it's unedited, y'all.
It is
We're
unedited. I
professional.
was like,
We
okay,
have
this is
proof
getting
that
too
we're
loud.
unedited. Yeah,
Um,
exactly. No, you're good.
so,
You're good.
and so I think about like, so I would in that sense say that Western Europe is still individual, but more community oriented than the United States because it's more socially democratic, right? Whereas Asian cultures tend to be much more communitarian, not necessarily, I mean, there's obviously dictatorships in Asian cultures, but it's just an orientation that is slightly different.
Yeah, yeah,
And I just think the US is just such a troubling example of the excesses of individualism and how that can create or lead to enormous inequality.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, and I think what's really interesting about it, going back to your setup there around, I thought I was being, a good villager. I thought I was doing all the right things, but now I'm like, I don't know. So, like, even the conundrum of defining the two words, how do you define your village? And what's your unique style of being a villager, right? Because Lisa, you and I in previous episodes have had this conversation around certain things where I think you and I both are good villagers. I think sometimes you lean towards being a great villager right now, and I lean towards being a great villager for longer term because I'm thinking about a longer term solution rather than a right now solution, right? So
Yep,
folks
yep.
are hungry right now, and you're thinking, I want to feed them right now. Shauna's like, okay, I want to build 6 food banks that will take us 10 years, but it will lead us into posterity for several generations. That's the shit that we're on right now, right? But both are good, both are needed, both are wanted. And so, with that, I think that gets us to this place where it's like, okay, now we have to query what does a village look like? Now, of course, we know, Lisa, we are not naive to this. We know depending on your multiple identities that you're listening to this podcast through, your understanding of a village, especially in the United States, is going to be very different depending on who you are. So, for example, if I were talking to a white male or female on this podcast that's originally from the United States, they may all think that they've always been part of this village. Whereas for me personally, I'm like, yeah, there's a village and I've kind of had one foot in, but it hasn't always been allowed for me to have both feet in it. But I know it's there, and ideally, I want it to accept both feet. Or, other folks who are immigrants here or what have you. And so the village is going to be defined differently. I would imagine if I talk to African American men in this country or veterans in particular, where they're like, wait a minute, I'm defending the village. And then sometimes I feel like I'm on the fringe of the village based on how the village treats me. Like we could go into
Right,
all those
right.
nuances of it. And so
Hmm.
I do think we need to reflect on what the village, how do we define the village? How do we define our role in the village? We know the village is not ideal, especially not now, but for some of us, it's never been the ideal. And how do we want to contribute to it? I'm never
Yeah.
saying go out and be like intentionally mean to people. Um, but at the same time, what lane do you choose to get in? Like, there are going to be some people that are always going to be for the systemic greater good of the village. There are going to be other people that are like, nope, I want to address right now, right now, right now. That's one of the things that Lisa, you and I, we've done some work. This was a few years ago where we were looking at nonprofit work, philanthropic work, and how it truly becomes it is its own industrial complex, if you will,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
unfortunately, women end up doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Women of color do a lot of heavy lifting without the titles and the clout that goes with it. And they're the ones doing the right now work. And then you got people that are making freaking policy about immigration and obesity and disabilities that think they're doing the greater good work. What happens when the disconnect between what we see as
Hmm.
villager and others see as villager? Like, there are people, it's true, Lisa, especially for us as women, but we could go into different identities. There are people that are making decisions right now who think they're creating this wonderful village
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and being a good villager when in fact they're slapping other villagers in the face, you and I included. They think they're doing the right thing, Lisa. They think they're
Yeah.
doing the right thing.
Yeah. I was putting together like this ideological spectrum for students in my policy class, and I sent it to
Ah,
my friend that does a lot of policy work. And I forget what I had worded, but it was around like individual focus versus community focus. And that I was
ooh,
I was kind of very broad brushes, high level, right? Because it doesn't always
yeah,
break down. But generally, people on the right tend to be more individualistic. People on the left tend to be more community oriented, generally speaking, right?
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely
generally.
acknowledge there are exceptions to that. But
Mhm.
she said to me something like, I don't think this is how folks who are right of center and kind of ideologically more conservative would frame it that way, right? So even
Oh,
me kind of even just like it is a simplistic breakdown, but even me breaking it down that way, community versus individual, she's like, to your point, she's like, people on the right, many of them probably don't frame it that way, right? They probably do see themselves as community oriented, and to be community oriented is to protect an individual person's rights,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
that's for the good of the community, right? Like, so
Hmm.
that was a kind of aha moment for me to even think about how do we even frame it, because there's the healthcare debate that's happening right now, and some of the ideas that are coming out of the Republican Party from more quote unquote moderate, who are still pretty far right these days, are that we should just take all those Affordable Care Act subsidies and just give them to people who can then use that money to buy their own health insurance plans. Let's not give it
Okay.
to those big, nasty health insurance companies directly, but they're still, side point, they're still actually getting the money. It's just
They're
coming
still getting the
through
money anyway.
someone
Yeah, yeah.
else, right? Yeah.
That's
But
right.
like this idea of that is a much more um, beneficial idea for the community, because each individual then has market power to negotiate with a health insurance company to get their own plan, because we're giving them money to do that. And how
Yeah.
liberatory is that, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm
yeah, yeah.
thinking that's an absolutely insane idea that isn't going to work, because people don't negotiate. And if you take
Uh-huh.
away all the protections of the Affordable Care Act, then a significant number of people with pre-existing conditions and other things won't even be able to get health insurance, right? Because there'll be
Exactly.
no
Right.
protections for them. So
Right.
how
Right.
exactly is that? I don't see that as community focused at all. But I
Yeah.
truly think some more good faith actors, and there are still a few, I think truly believe that giving individuals power to negotiate and work within this marketplace, that is a community focused perspective. So your point
Incredible.
around how are we defining village and what it means to be a villager,
Yes, yes.
I do think is I do think is important, but no one is going to say, sure. Actually, that's not true. Stephen Miller would probably say this, but few people are going to say, oh no, I have no interest in being part of a village and being a villager, right? I mean, who's going to few people, the sociopath people, the narcissistic people, maybe, but because that's not an image people want of themselves to be.
Mm.
People want to
Mm-hmm.
be considered a team player, a community member, someone who's willing to help a neighbor, right? I mean, we're coming into a season now where there's just like a bazillion commercials all focused around being a good neighbor and
Mm-hmm.
Chip, being a good neighbor, isn't that like an insurance company?
State
Isn't
Farm, I
that
think. I
right?
think it's State Farm.
You're like you're being
Like a good
we the
neighbor,
insurance
State Farm
company,
is there.
yeah, we
Yep.
are a good neighbor. That's pulling on the villager village thing. But
Mm-hmm.
really? Really?
Yeah.
Is that really what role you're playing? Insurance company? I'm not sure.
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
Anyway, sorry, that I just went that was a little bit of a circuitous.
No, no, no. But here's the thing though, Lisa. It is again the village piece of things. It's like some people literally wake up thinking, I'm already part of the village. If you don't see yourself as part of the village, then that's not my problem. But I
Right,
feel like
right.
I'm already part of the village. You figure out how you are going to make yourself feel like you're part of the village, but I'm good over here. Versus bringing people together. Like, what's the nucleus of the village? What's the nucleus of the village? Sometimes it's an elder. Sometimes it's the person with the most money. Sometimes it's the person that holds their local language that's unwritten. But what brings together villages in this country, I strongly would suggest would be whoever is the strongest white supremacist in the room because everything draws towards the normality of whiteness, maleness, straightness, Christianness. It all that is the village, and anybody that is outside of those descriptors, they're like, look, we already exist as the village. We exist so strongly as the village that we don't even have to think about being a village. We don't even have the language for village because we already are it. Now you come on over if you want to or not.
Yeah,
Oftentimes or not.
so to be a good in that kind of conceptualization, to be a good villager, to be a community member is to support my desire to keep people out, which goes back to the first phase about how we're limiting immigration, right?
Mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm,
that's the good community
mm-hmm.
member role. It's not picking up the thing in the grocery store. It's not going to pick your friend up from the airport. It's not doing tasks for someone who is injured and has limited mobility or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or buying groceries for someone because their SNAP benefits have been held up by the government. That's not what it
Mm-hmm.
is. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
being a good villager, and that is protecting your own and
Yeah,
quote unquote your own in
yeah,
the
yeah,
US context is
yeah.
white,
Mm-hmm.
Christian, straight,
Mm-hmm.
mostly male, but certainly women too. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that nuclear, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so,
Hmm.
so that's what makes me beg the question, where we don't have to go too far down this road, but there are fences for a reason. There are people that want to keep certain people in, people
Right,
that want to
right.
keep certain people. I think I'm going back to my same wall analogy, Lisa, but it,
Yeah,
it's it is I always ask that question when it comes to a fence, when it comes to a door, when it comes to any of that. Is the purpose of it to keep the existing folks in or to keep non-villagers out? And sometimes I feel like we spend much more time keeping non-villagers out rather than inviting people into the village, which to me is the antithesis of what we thought we were doing as the United States and
right, right.
clearly distinguishing ourselves from the British.
I mean, it's just yeah, there's just a fundamental tension, I think, between
Hmm.
how this country was founded and
Hmm.
that's why there's no universal health care. I mean, there were attempts at
Hmm.
it, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not my
Absolutely.
job to pay for your health care, right? That's your
Not
thing,
my problem.
not my
Not my.
problem, right? Which goes back to the, you know, the
So
reels that started this.
exactly. Well, so of course another reel comes up in my mind. I can't remember if it was in Japan or China. Um, there was a reel quite a long time ago that talked about, let's say we're all going into this major employer. We're going into the office, and of course we have a huge parking lot. Well, in the United States, what do we do here? If you're going into work, depending on what time you get here, you park as close as you can. And so if this is the door, you park as close to the door, and whenever you arrive, you're further and further and further,
Hmm.
right? Based on this particular reel, because they think differently and in community, the first person to arrive at work, if this is the door, they park further away. Why? Because the people that get to work later need to get in more quickly, so
More
they need to
quickly.
park
Yeah.
closer, right?
Yeah.
An American would never think of that shit.
No,
We don't
never. That
think
would
that way.
never happen here.
F you, and it's your fault if you were late to
Yep.
work. You're just gonna have to
That's your
run across the
problem.
parking lot because that is your problem. And I have a right to this parking space. I don't care if
Yep.
I'm 5 hours early and I got time to walk 1,000 miles to get to work. You have to suffer the consequences of not being here on time because that is on you, not on me.
Yep. 100%.
And so yeah, I feel like this whole country is that parking lot. It's, whoever gets to the
Yeah.
money first, which is not fair because we know some people came out the womb with money in their hand.
Yep. Yep.
Whoever gets to the thing first is the winner in this country. Some of us will never get to the thing. They will never get to
Yeah.
the money. They will never get to the full health care. They will never get to all these things. And
No.
so they have to park a mile away.
Right. Goodness, we can't redistribute that because that would be disastrous, right? To redistribute.
I earn this money, Lisa. You don't get to
Mm.
redistribute my money, even though I don't need it and will never need this much. You don't get to redistribute my money because it's my money. Okay.
All right.
Maybe we're just living in the wrong country, Lisa. Like, I
I don't know. I mean, I know that we're not alone in our perspectives
we're
here.
not.
It
Correct.
sometimes feels like people who feel this way, there are few and far between in leadership. I would like
Mhm.
more of the villager redistribution, care about your neighbor really, truly, honestly. Um, I'd like those people in leadership roles.
That's right. That's right. Yes,
Yeah.
those little acts of kindness, they can bring us together for sure. So do
Hmm.
more of that. Let's do more of
Yep.
that. Oh, all right, y'all. Well, that's it for this episode of the Unfazed, Unedited podcast. I just want to remind you, please don't forget to share the podcast, y'all. What are you doing? Share that. We're talking about good stuff. And on top of that, very soon we're going to be creeping into a little bit of a break because we all need one for the holidays. But please remind your folks to take a look at our podcast on wherever they find their podcast. Make sure they look on our website, unfazedpodcast.com, for old and new episodes. But if you like this week, please share it. Subscribe, leave a review, share it with your friends, coworkers, or others in your village. Hello, in your village.
Yep.